If you clicked on this video, you're likely already using ChatGPT for different pieces of your life. Maybe you're creating recipe lists, maybe you're using it at work or in business, but it kind of stops there, right? You've dipped your toes, but you're not necessarily going ham. Well, my goal for this video is to level up that knowledge by showing you 3 other tools that are still beginner friendly, but will radically shift your productivity and effectiveness in life. Because it's fair to say at this point that AI is here to stay, and that industries long thought safe are getting flipped on their heads. From AI sales teams to AI secretaries that can have phone conversations to AI doctors that can diagnose cancer, the world as we know it is shifting big time. So what role should it play in your life? Whether you have a 9-to-5 job and just want to stand out at work, whether you're a student that wants to learn AI to do better at school or learn more effectively or just do cool stuff, play funny pranks on your friends with AI, or maybe you just want to become an entrepreneur one day and you see that AI is a potential stepping stone on that journey. Whatever the case may be, I believe that the next big boom in AI is going to come through bringing the technology closer to everyday people. So in this video, I want to show you 3 categories of AI tools that anyone can use that will dramatically improve your effectiveness and your productivity, and give you specific examples of how you can use them in your day-to-day life. I tried to create this guide while keeping in mind that not everybody runs a business, not everybody is a YouTube creator, not everybody runs a marketing agency. I tried to create something that would be broadly applicable to any beginner. So from that perspective, the AI tools industry can be thought of in 2 primary categories. Number 1, you have the model creation companies, meaning the company that makes the tool like ChatGPT. Number 2, you have model usage, meaning companies that build tools that use that AI, right? Companies that build a tool on top of ChatGPT, for example. So most people, regardless of background, have probably heard about ChatGPT. And if you're lucky, maybe you've heard of tools like Claude, Anthropic, Deepseek, other tools like that. Those would be what we call models. Now, for someone that is a beginner, I think it's most practical to get started with models because you can chat with them directly and they can have a significant impact on your actual day-to-day life. You can get a lot more work done in a lot less time with better outputs. And so that is going to be the focus of this video. I'm not going to show you a tool like Grammarly that happens to use AI or anything like that. I am going to show you companies that have built models or systems of their own built on top of their own models, because I think, again, those are going to be the most useful to the most people because it allows you to interact with the AI in the way that you want to. And so we're going to, again, cover off on 3 primary categories. And the reason that I say categories is that there are different tools or different providers that offer similar solutions. And so I'm going to give you free versions and paid versions of each of these. And if you don't like the specific company that I'm recommending you use, that's fine. There are other companies that solve the same fundamental problem. And so the first category, which is really a bonus category that you should already have as background knowledge if you're watching this video, is ChatGPT, right? Your standard large language model. And again, if you're watching this video, you probably know what those use cases are for yourself already. So the first new category is going to be a reasoning model. You may have heard about this, you may have not, but these large language models are starting to get very smart. They can now reason at a PhD level. They can solve PhD level problems, which is kind of crazy. And we can use that knowledge for our own day-to-day problem solving. This is going to be a bit different from how you're used to using ChatGPT, where you give it an input and it kind of immediately answers you. The reasoning models will go out sometimes for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to really think through your problem. A lot of benefits of this: number 1, you don't have to provide really long prompts telling it exactly what you want it to do. It can reason for itself. It can think through how it needs to solve the problem, and then it can go out and solve the problem and give you your answer. These are super, super, super powerful. This alone will be a huge uplift over your current ChatGPT or basic large language model usages. Number 2, an answer engine. The days of having to go to Google and sift through pages and pages of content and search for a slightly different question to try to get better content and have to sift through all of the bloggers that are just trying to sell you products that they know they can monetize, that world is gone. The future is answer engines, meaning AI that can synthesize all of that information for you, understand what question you're asking, and actually return you the answer without you having to go sift through all of the sources. And then last but not least, probably the most advanced of the bunch, but still very practical and approachable for a beginner, is going to be a retrieval augmented system such as Notebook LM. Don't be afraid by that phrase, retrieval augmented generation, also known as RAG. If you hear people refer to RAG, it is basically a system where you can give the AI a lot of your own information and your own context, and it can then reason based on what you already know. And we'll get into some examples of that here in a second. So that being said, let's hop in and look at our first category of tools, which was reasoning models. So like I said in the intro, there's a few different tools, and different tools are free, different tools are paid, okay? So what are the tools that are generally the most popular that fit into this category? The first one, which is a paid tool, is ChatGPT's O1 and O3 model. So if you hear at all about O1 or O3, those are what we call reasoning models. They are different from your standard ChatGPT that you might be used to using because they can go out there and solve problems more independently. They can think through how they need to solve a problem so that you don't have to tell it, hey, go here, do this. Then when you have that, do this. Then when you have that, do this. You don't have to give it that chain of reasoning. You just say, hey, what is the answer to this question? Or, hey, go solve this problem for me. And it can go out and do it. So ChatGPT O1 Pro, in my experience, is the best at doing this. That being said, it is a paid model. Okay, so you're going to have to pay for access to the O1 and the O3 models. I believe the cheapest plan for those to get access to them is $20 a month. I have the premium version, which I get unlimited access to all of them, and that is $200 a month. It's a little bit more expensive, but when you think of the context of using this as a power user, it's like having 5 or 6 virtual assistants that I would usually pay thousands of dollars for working for me for pretty cheap. So that being said, the first of these, again, think of them like it's the smartest person you've ever met probably in your life, but they're trained on nearly any topic you could ever think of. And so they're really good at doing the heavy lifting of thinking through a problem. Now, the reason this can be really good is you can have a tool like O1 or a reasoning model think through the problem and how the problem needs to be solved. And then you can have a different tool like your standard ChatGPT 4.0 model, for example, go and do the grunt work really fast of solving that problem after you've determined how it needs to be solved in the first place. But let's get into some examples of what that actually looks like. So like I said, so that being said, there's like 2 or 3 big models that people really use in this space. O1 Pro, which I just talked a lot about. The other one that you may have heard of if you're somewhat involved in the AI space or know about it, or know people that know about it, because I'm sure they all talked about it, is this model called Deepseek. It's got this logo with a big whale on it. It has its reasoning model called R1. So this is free. So if you want to use one for free, you can use Deepseek's R1 model. There are some ethical considerations depending on where you sit geopolitically, because all of this data is sent overseas to other countries, whereas the ChatGPT data it's owned by US-based companies. So Deepseek is your second free option. And then a third free option, if you're a fan of the Googleverse, you have Google's AI Studio. Inside of that, they have their Flash experimental and their thinking models, which are, again, reasoning models, right? They can reason through problems. So that being said, I know I've talked a lot about how these things can reason through problems. So let's actually have it go reason through some problems. So first things first, what might be a common thing that like we approach in our daily life that isn't necessarily like business focused, right? I don't want these to be just like, hey, how to go solve a business problem. A big use case for a lot of these things is actually like research-oriented problems, okay? And so this one wasn't actually run through 0440 mini, so I'm not sure why it's saying it up there. But let's say, for example, we want to lose some weight. Oh no, we find ourselves 30 pounds overweight and we're like, oh man, I shouldn't look like this. What happened to my high school body? I need to get back in shape. Well, this is a really good example of where we can use a tool to solve a concrete problem that we have. The days, for example, of having to go out and pay a personal trainer $1,500 a month to basically do this is very quickly fading away. Now, obviously, if you're going to apply something you learn from the AI, you have to keep yourself on track. You're not going to have somebody yelling at you necessarily, unless you make an AI bot to yell at you, which is possible. But we can have it solve problems. So let's say scientifically, what's the best way to manage a calorie deficit and not have a rebound where your metabolism slows down? The goal is fat loss of 2 pounds per week. Now, the thing that's pretty cool about these deep research models is that they will ask you follow-up questions to make sure they're answering the question as best as possible. So to provide the scientific strategies for managing calorie deficit, answer these questions. It basically says, hey, what do you really want to do here? And I say, I'm looking for research into calorie intake and macro distribution, as well as strength training and cardio, right? And so it went out, and for 5 minutes, it peeled through all of these different resources in order to answer this question. So it went out and read these Harvard articles. It went out to PubMed. It went out to all of these different places, and again, just read what was going on there. Kind of crazy. Look at all these things. It read through all of these studies, synthesized the information, and then gave me like a legitimate answer to these questions. And so the thing that's cool here too is that you can see how it thought through each stage of that process. How is it actually thinking through each stage of this process? So boom, it's assembling the plan. Then it learns that there's this idea called RMR, right? Resting metabolic rate. And so it's like, okay, well, I need to go out and research that now. And so it goes and it researches that. And then it's just, as it's finding new information, it realizes there's a hole in what it understands, and it goes out and it searches for that. And then it gets more information and it goes out and it searches for that, right? It's like, oh, wow, lean muscle tissue, or preserving lean muscle tissue is impacted by your protein intake. Let me go research that. And so it goes through and it just does that process, goes through all of these sources. In this example, it researched for 5 minutes, which in 5 minutes in machine time, it is computing at an incredibly fast rate, right? It's flying through all of these resources and piecing together problems that it would take you hours, if not days, really, to go through this and understand all of this and put it into a cohesive output. And so, boom, here we go. It's telling me what my calorie deficit needs to be. Hey, if you want to lose 2 pounds a week, that means you need to have a 1,000 calorie per day deficit, since a pound of fat is 3,500 calories, for example. If your maintenance is 2,500, you'd aim for 1,500 per day, blah, blah, blah. Then it talks about how I need to maintain really high protein in order to maintain my muscle mass, and then gives me recommendations on that. Then it tells me how to distribute my carbs, how to distribute my fats, how I should take into account strength training, cardio training, all of that type of stuff, right? How to avoid metabolism slowing down. For every 6 weeks, I should take 1 week of eating back at maintenance calories. So you're giving me really practical stuff. And now I could take all of this, like I said earlier, and say something like, taking all of this into account, I am a 5'9" male weighing 160 pounds at 15% body fat. I'm 33 years old. Build me out a 8-week weight loss plan to reach 150 pounds at 10% body fat, right? So now it's going to take all that context. Now it's going to go fast, right? Now it's using the 4.0 mini model, and it's going through. It's taking all of this information that it just gathered, and it's specifically going through and building me out a plan, which is pretty awesome. This actually matches very closely a plan that I had an actual personal trainer build for me. So pretty cool. What's another example of how we can use one of these reasoning models? I wanted it to build me a investment portfolio. So I said, hey, these are 3 people who I respect the opinions of, and I want you to help take their principles to build me an investment portfolio. And I say, I want you to think specifically about some of their ideas, right? So Jack Bogle talks a lot about using index funds. Ray Dalio talks a lot about having uncorrelated income streams so that a dip in one doesn't tank your entire portfolio. And then Warren Buffett talks about like value-based investing, right? Finding undervalued investments. And so take all of that into account, but then I also want you to fuse in some of my personal beliefs. I want you to overweight precious metals. I want you to avoid US government bonds. I want you to expose me to small and mid-cap companies, so like smaller companies that are building cutting-edge technology. I want you to have some consumer staples and global energy stuff, right? Just things that I generally think about the world or care about in general. And then said, go build me a portfolio based on this stuff. It asked me a few questions. What's your risk tolerance? Blah, 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 other stuff like that. And then it went out and again, researched this time for 12 minutes. We can look at the sources it went through. Went through all of these different things and then constructed me an entire investment portfolio, right? Again, thinking through if I wanted access to this type of reasoning or logic, I would have had to historically go pay a financial advisor. So kind of crazy to think about that I can use a tool that just goes out and does all of this for me and then back tests the portfolio, right? So not only builds me a portfolio that properly infuses all of these different ideas together, right? Nails on the head, Dalio's economic seasons, then builds me out an entire portfolio with the index funds that I asked it to, and then back tests it and tells me how this would have fared in every single economic scenario since the 1970s, right? And does this all for me in 12 minutes. Kind of crazy, right? Kind of crazy to think about. And then I said, hey, there's a few more things that I would like to expand on here. I want you to actually build out more of this logic. It goes out for another 13 minutes and further builds out like exact stock picks for me. So kind of crazy. And you can think like in the context of your life, what is something that has traditionally been gated to people with significant subject matter expertise that you can now take advantage of directly through a tool like this? Last but not least, one that I just thought was a little interesting to do is I said, I'd like your help constructing a STEM-based homeschool curriculum for a child entering first grade. There should be a maximum of 2 to 3 hours of studying each day. The rest of the time should be spent active or expressing creativity or learning generally useful life skills. Build me a plan for first grade and then pace it out through 5th grade. Make sure not only to include the curriculum, but guidance for a parent on how to encourage the child and guide them. And so it goes out. This one was a little bit quicker, but I'm using a more powerful model, O1 Pro in this case. The other ones were O3 Mini, which is a different reasoning model. So it went through and it's building me out a sample breakdown, right? So 20 to 30 minutes on reading and phonics, 20 to 30 minutes on math, science exploration, technology and engineering, having your kids build Legos, things like that. Now, this is obviously a really good example of it built me out something that you could argue is like somewhat vague, right? This isn't something that you can take to the bank, right? You need to build this out if you wanted to genuinely do this. But it's pretty cool how it built out what that entire path should look like from 1st to 5th grade and what like blocks they should be able to reach at each point of that process. And so this is something where we could take this and we can start really doubling down and saying, I want you to really robustly build out like this reading and writing piece. Like give me actual lesson plans for like a day by day or a week by week. Give me specific reading recommendations based on my values, right? Things that I think about the world and so on. So really, really cool, really powerful stuff, right? If you were to think of the quality of these outputs compared with stuff that you typically see from ChatGPT as an output, blows it away. Not only blows it away in terms of the length and the detail, but in terms of the actual reasoning that it's doing, right? You got to imagine, again, these are PhD level models that can think through stuff. So if I'm prompting and I'm like, hey, build me a stock portfolio, it's taking PhD level concepts and reasoning into account when it builds this stuff out for us, which is pretty awesome. That was the first of these models. Again, this was the reasoning-based models, right? They can think through problems like in an amazing, amazing, amazing way. And then we have 3 different tools we can use for this. We have Deepseek. We have our Gemini Flash Thinking Experimental. And then we have our O1 Pro. Now, just for one last little attempt. So those are our reasoning models. Now, if you wanted to, we can come back through and paste in like one last little test with each of these other tools just to see what they look like. Let me pause real quick and just pop in a prompt. All right, so we're going to come in here. I typed out a little prompt here. I have a 5-year-old child that doesn't listen to me very well. He throws tantrums and won't stop testing our boundaries. Full disclosure, I do not have a child. This is not me. He doesn't really listen when we threaten punishment. What are some different schools of thought and how to solve this? So the thing that's cool about Deepseek, as it starts to go out and process, is that it's going to show you its thinking in real time as this starts rolling out, which for some reason it's loading. And here it goes. So boom. So it's pretty cool because you can see like exactly how these models are reasoning through problems and what it's thinking about. So they're talking about the Montessori method, permissive parenting, which is more lenient, Adlerian parenting. So it's going through all of this stuff. I ran the same prompt into the Gemini Flash thinking model, and similarly gives you a bunch of different examples, right? Positive parenting, behavioral conditioning approaches, authoritative parenting, attachment based, just giving you different things that you could think through. So you can imagine if you're like, I don't know, a parent that's actually dealing with this as a problem, this would be a pretty awesome thing that you could test out. So there we have it with our reasoning models. Let us pop in now and look at an answer engine. So for your everyday use cases, you're going to use something like Perplexity in the same way that you would use. Perplexity, by the way, is the answer engine that we're looking at. There's a few different ones, but this is, I think, the best. Has a free version as well as a paid pro version. I'm using the pro version in this example. The only difference is that it's how deep it will go into the research with pro versus the free plan. The free plan, obviously, it takes resources from them, so it's a little bit more cursory, but still really, really good. And so it's going to be useful in any situation where you would use a Google search. It's just that you're going to get to your answer a lot more quickly. And so let's go through here and pop one in and see what we can get. One obvious example would be something like shopping, right? So we could obviously do other stuff where we're asking about calorie, fat loss, and investment portfolios and all of that, which is cool. And you can use this type of tool for doing that type of research, or maybe in like more contained areas where you're looking for more like quicker, specific responses to something. But we can also use it for something practical like shopping and comparison shopping, right? So if we were to come in here, we could say something like, rank for me the top 5 creatine brands where the powder is manufactured in the USA, for example, right? And so again, if we were thinking about like having to do this, to search for this, you'd have to go out to places like Amazon. You'd have to make a few different variations of these searches. You'd have to look through every single one of the 20 different articles that are talking about their own top 5 and then sifting out like, is it actually made here in the US or is it not made in the US? Like all of that type of stuff. Whereas this tool is just going to go out and it's going to run through this very quickly. It's going to read through all of the pages, gather all of the sources, and just give you the response. And so there we go. It took like, I don't know, 15 seconds or so. And so here are the top 5 manufacturers that manufacture in the US, right? So they have Thorne, which is a great supplement brand, by the way, Transparent Labs, and a few others, right? So pretty awesome if you think of that like from a shopping perspective. And then you could do a price comparison now, right? Say, find out the prices and display them to me in a chart, right? So that's another cool thing where if you think of how you would traditionally use ChatGPT, where you can say like, yeah, I want this result, but I want it in this way. You can do that with these answer engines too. So again, think of like a context where you were searching something in Google. You don't say to Google, hey, find the answer to my problem, but then I also want you to display the information in this specific way, right? It doesn't do that. And so here we can do things like that, which is, again, super cool. Goes through, and now it's building us out an actual chart and telling us where we can go and find that product. So this is a really, really cool use case. And again, on that topic of that we can give it prompts, we could prompt it similarly, like a really popular one, for example, in chat is like, explain it to me like a 5th grader. So we could say something like, explain the impact of Deepseek R1 to me like I'm a 5th grader. So Deepseek R1, just for everybody's context, is a Chinese reasoning model. It's the one that we looked at earlier that came out, and it's causing a big commotion in the industry. And so let's see how it explains it to us like a 5th grader, right? So not only reads all ththese resources, finds out like what is the impact, but then it can explain it to us very clearly. Imagine you and your friends are playing with building blocks. You've been using the same big expensive blocks for a long time. Suddenly a new kid shows up with a different set of blocks and he can build just as cool stuff, but his blocks don't cost an arm and a leg. So pretty cool, right? It's able to take that, and you can think of like all the different use cases where something like this might be practical for you. So answer engines, super, super dope. If you're not using them, why, right? You're just kind of bashing your head against a wall trying to use a tool like Google at this point. highly recommend checking out tools like this that are answer engines. So last but not least, we have this idea of a RAG system. Like I mentioned earlier, and I did say that this was going to be one of the more complicated of these concepts. So what is a RAG system? So in order to explain that to you, I have to explain kind of how the AI stuff works. AI is trained on information, right? So companies like OpenAI, who owns ChatGPT, or Google, they've gone out over years and years and years and compiled, which is a nice way to say it, information from everywhere. So these tools have literally been trained on terabytes and terabytes and terabytes and terabytes, which if you don't know, it's a lot of information, right? Billions and billions and trillions of different pieces of information have been put into these models in order to train them. Now, that training usually has a cutoff date, meaning, for example, if you're using a certain tool like ChatGPT, just as an example, and I'm not going to have the specific date here, it may not have information that was published in 2024, right? It has a training cutoff date. So it might only have information up to 2023. So if you try to ask it a question that it wasn't trained on that information, whether it's because it never had the information or it was the thing that you're talking about happened after the training cutoff, it can't answer the question, right? Because it doesn't actually have that information. And so when we talk about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, we are taking our information that the model doesn't have and we're giving it to it, right? So we're saying, hey, ChatGPT, hey, a Google Notebook, which is what I'm about to show you here in a second. These are pieces of information that you did not actually have access to. So let's actually go and look at what this looks like. So for example, I have this, and this is like going to be a more basic one. I have these two books. So one is a book on mental models, which is just ways of thinking about problems. And one is a text version of a book called Poor Charlie's Almanac, which was basically, it's a distillation of Charlie Munger, prominent investor, partner with Warren Buffett, his way of thinking about the world. So it's just giving it these pieces of information specifically, and then we can ask questions based on this information. So if I was to come through here and say, I want you to build me a study guide based off of these, right? So if we were to think of like maybe you're a student or you just want to study a topic even, we can give it these sources and say, based on all the sources, build me a study guide. And so if we go through here now, it's asking us questions about this specific content, right? Asking us questions about it. It's giving us essay questions that we could use to think about expanding upon these ideas. It's giving us glossary of terms. We could also just come through and ask it a question. How could I apply the concept of inversion, which is a mental model where you think about the opposite of a problem? How could I apply the concept of inversion to fixing the show rate issue with my sales team? It's going to go through, it's going to read the context of the book or the sources, think through what is inversion, like what's this guy even talking about? Like, oh, okay, it's this concept where you flip a problem and think of it from the opposite side. How can I apply that now to this issue that the person gave me? And so it's going to go through, it's going to give you questions to ask, how to invert the problem, things like that. So pretty cool. Here's another example, right? We've talked a lot about fitness. So in this example, I've uploaded sources that are how to build exercise programs and diets, basically, for longevity's sake. And so I could come through here and I could say, how could I build a 3-day training plan that is full body based on the principles discussed in these sources? So now it's going to read those sources specifically and answer the question only based on those sources. So it's going to go out to this stuff on Peter Attia and this other guy who I bought one of his periodization, like training template things. And it's going to go through, it's going to read both of those sources. It's going to merge them together. It's going to kind of reason through the problem a little bit. And it is going to give me a high level 3-day full body training split based on everything it found, right? So it's going through and pulling these exercises from this PDF that I gave it. So pretty cool. One last like concrete use case here is for recipes. I like to cook a lot, And so one thing I did was I went out and I pulled what my different recipes are. So I have them all in like a Google Drive folder, not all of them, but some of them. And now I can go out and I can ask questions based on that, right? So let's say, what is a good dish for a dinner party of vegetarians, right? So if I were to ask it something like that, it's going to look through all of my different recipes and it's going to give me some recommendations. So the chickpea curry, mushroom risotto, spicy meatballs, but you can make it vegetarian by replacing the lamb with something else. Just give me some cool different things. And then I could say, how could I take the chickpea curry and add a meat to it, right? And so it's able to go through, it can go look at the recipe, take into the context what it knows about creating a good recipe, and then it can give me back like, hey, you could add chicken, you could add chorizo, you could add lamb to it. And so again, it's able to take the body of knowledge that I have, is the core concept here, can take that body of knowledge that I have and use the information from that body of knowledge to answer the question. Because ChatGPT isn't going to have this exact recipe that I have, right? It's not going to have the exact ratios. It's not going to have access to my list of 20 recipes that I like to cook at parties or anything like that. It's not going to have that stuff. So this allows me to give it to the system, and the system can then look at the context of what I've given it and answer the problems based on that context. Now, there's a lot of other really cool use cases that you could think about. Here, I gave you a few where, hey, help me answer problems based on this framework for solving problems. Help me build a fitness plan based on these principles of a fitness plan. For example, let me just give you a little idea. You could go out, pull down a transcript of your favorite Instagram influencer, all of the Instagram reels they've done in 2024 where they're doing different exercises and stuff like that. Pull the transcripts, pump the transcripts in here, and then say, build me out my own exercise plan based on knowing that my favorite influencer does all of this stuff. So again, it's a great way to be able to give context to a system and let it do other stuff for you. Let's say you're traveling somewhere in Europe and you have travel guides. You could pump all of those travel guides in here, plus your itinerary, plus different considerations for each person that you're traveling with, what they like, what they don't like, and have it use all of that to build you out like an actual day-to-day travel plan. So a lot of really cool stuff that you can do. Again, the intention behind this video was that it's for somebody that's using ChatGPT but wants to like take that skill set in an approachable way to the next level. And these are 3 tools that will absolutely help you do that. So I hope you found this video helpful. If there are any other tools that you'd like to see me explore or any other videos you'd like to see, please leave a comment and I will prioritize it. See you in the next video.